Today, we're diving into some of the most pivotal and controversial topics in American governance with a guest who's no stranger to demanding accountability and exposing systemic failures.
Our federal health agencies have completely covered up the fact that they well knew about vaccine injuries, they knew about myocarditis, they knew about this within months, and they literally, to this day, have still done nothing about it.
Senator Ron Johnson is here. As the former chair of the permanent subcommittee on investigations, Senator Johnson has wielded some of the most powerful investigatory tools in the U.S. Senate.
We may not have a smoking gun, but the circumstantial evidence is strong that this was a man-made virus and that it was probably leaked from a lab.
And in this episode, we'll unpack the findings of the Select Subcommittee's report on the coronavirus pandemic's after-action review, which is a sweeping 520-page report. Senator Johnson exposes how legacy media play a central role in concealing these truths from the public.
The most dangerous part of our democracy is we don't have an unbiased media holding both sides equally accountable.
And then beyond the pandemic, Senator Johnson will address the broader issues of federal overreach,
the greatest single bit of election interference in my lifetime,
and government corruption from the FBI to the FDA, as well as steps Congress must take to restore trust in government and protect individual freedoms. Let's get into it.
Keeping it real with Jillian Michaels.
Senator, so great to see you again. Thank you for being here.
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity. The long format interviews are just so much nicer than the little 33-minute snippets on cable TV.
Oh my gosh, I know exactly what you mean, because you're trying to choose from 1,000 different facts about something and pick 3, and then hope that the question is pitched at you just so that it comes out organically and authentically. So unfortunately for you, though, I don't know if you're going to feel that way. I've got about 8 pages of questions for you.
That's fine.
And I'm going to start with this one, boss. The Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic concluded a 2-year investigation into COVID-19 and released a final report that's 520 pages. Senator, what exactly is this? What's new? What are the takeaways? Because you've been a dog with a bone about this one for 3 years now.
Well, from my standpoint, there was really nothing new there.
Right.
What made news is the fact that, okay, they concluded that this was a virus that really emanated in some way, shape, or form from the Wuhan lab. And to which I just go, duh.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Right. And again, I think what I most object to is the conclusion that the vaccine saved millions of lives, that there's no science that backs that up. I think most people conclude that, okay, very vulnerable populations, if it boosts their immunity, it might have saved some lives, but millions, while at the same time completely denying vaccine injuries. And they're now pointing to the study, for example, that mathematician Dennis Rancourt from Canada takes a look at and said, no, the vaccine probably caused 17 million deaths. Again, I don't know what the figure is. What I do know is our federal health agencies have completely covered up the fact that they well knew about vaccine injuries, they knew about myocarditis, they knew about this within months, and they literally, to this day, have still done nothing about it. They just continue to cover up and continue to push what I would consider a very dangerous mRNA injection. It's not a vaccine, it's an injection. It literally turns your body and its cells into a manufacturing site for something that is toxic to the body, that the body attacks. When the body attacks something, it creates inflammation. That's what myocarditis is. That's, attacks the spinal column and nerves. That's what all these neurological symptoms are. And now we know that it has DNA contamination, including the SV40 sequence, cancer causing. We're hearing about these turbo cancers. We hear about them, but the rest of the media is completely covering it up. And again, the federal health agencies are covering up as well.
Okay, Senator, I want to play devil's advocate here. 3 years ago, the country is in a crisis. Everything is shut down. We didn't know what we didn't know. You've heard the spiel, right? Well, 6 feet, well, we hoped so. Well, the masks, well, we hoped so. And I could go so far. In other words, Sir, I could say, I understand that you're acting on the side of caution to save lives, and you're finding all of this out in the free fall, but you were skeptical of this from the beginning. You were skeptical of the response across the board, from locking down schools, closing businesses, and then you were skeptical of the vaccine. What made you skeptical from onset? Because you took a hell of a lot of criticism for that position. And you turned out to be right, but how did you know?
I actually followed the science. So when John Ioannidis did an analysis of the Princess Cruise, and we just had a perfect research study in that Princess Cruise, I think 700 some passengers. And John Ioannidis, a mathematician, I think doctor out in Stanford, analyzed that and basically concluded, okay, the coronavirus is going to be dangerous if you're elderly, if you have certain comorbidities, but if you're young, if you're healthy, it'll be like possibly a bad flu. So I held a hearing in May with John Ioannidis, some other people, including Pierre Corey, by the way. First time I'd heard about him, I brought him on because at that point he was in New York. He was treating COVID patients and they were looking at corticosteroids as a treatment in the hospital. And it was working. Of course, he got ridiculed and vilified for that until this study came out in dexamethasone from the UK and said, I guess corticosteroids works. But going back to John Ioannidis, I held a hearing in May of 2020 where I held the hearing to try and calm everybody down. Listen, I wasn't downplaying the fact that coronavirus could be a deadly disease, but again, it wasn't Ebola at 40% fatality rate. It's not MERS at 10%, or 30%. It's not or whatever MERS was. It's not SARS at about 8.9%.
Right.
This might be a bad flu season. That's what Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, that was their conclusion. It was certainly the conclusion John Ioannidis. So again, this is May of 2020. Now, I'd also been focusing on early treatment. As soon as I heard of hydroxychloroquine, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical researcher, I thought, hey, maybe we got something to treat this. Why aren't we focusing on treating the disease? So I was all for monoclonal antibodies, whatever would work. If hydroxychloroquine would work, now we had early indications from, study, I think out of University of Michigan or I guess Henry Ford. So we were hearing these things would work. And I was actually talking to Novartis at that point in time. They're the manufacturers of hydroxychloroquine. They donated 30 million doses to the strategic reserve. And there was a logjam. Those things weren't getting out, but the CEO of Novartis, who I was texting all the time, was all excited about it. They were doing a bunch of studies that were going to be released in May. My biggest concern, would we have enough? If there was a therapeutic, if there was a drug, will we have enough manufacturing capability? And this is in April, May of 2020, where I was focusing on early treatment. Then all of a sudden, by the end of April, my communication with the CEO of Novartis went dark. So last time I ever texted him, last time I ever talked to him, and this is about the same time that they decided on Operation Warp Speed and a vaccine, which, by the way, I was also supportive of. I didn't care what it took.
Right.
We had to get by this pandemic. Again, I was a lot calmer about it when I saw the Princess Cruise data that this was going to be like a bad flu. I'm just kind of on the hinge point there. About 65 years old, just sort of, I'm elderly, but I'm still healthy. But so I wasn't as freaked out about it as other people were. So I was a big supporter of Operation Warp Speed until I connected with Michael Yeadon, who worked for Pfizer for 30 years, ended his career as the vice president of research. His specialty is toxicology. He was no longer working for Pfizer. He was doing joint ventures with him. He's still in biologics and in the drug world. When he heard what Pfizer was going to do, what his former colleagues were proposing, he said, Ron, there's a long list of ingredients we do not put into injectables because they're toxic to the body. When I heard my colleagues were going to produce an injection that was going to turn the body, the cell, into a manufacturing site for something that is toxic to it, he couldn't believe it. He literally couldn't believe it. He was beside himself. And then to make matters worse, they were going to encapsulate it in a lipid nanoparticle, which, by the way, Jillian, is designed to permeate difficult to permeate barriers, like the blood-brain, like the placental barrier.
Yes.
So again, he said, Ron, I was educated with these people. I worked with them. I know that they know what I know. I know they're lying to us. I know they know they're lying to us, and they're still doing it. Why? And this probably is October, November 2020. So at that point, I can guarantee you there was no way I was going to get that vaccine. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical researcher. I couldn't go out there and recommend against it because, I don't know, I don't have that expertise.
Right.
But what I could do is I could monitor the safety surveillance system, which, by the way, the FDA, CDC, they were touting before they got the emergency use authorization. In October, they put it like an 8-hour clinic, and they were just talking up the VAERS system, how they were going to be watching that like a hawk. If there was somebody that missed even time from work, they were going to have a CDC representative on the phone talking to that individual to find out what was happening. That was all, pardon my French, that was all total bullshit. Total bullshit, because they didn't follow up on it. So fast forward to about April of 2021. Now, we've been giving these vaccines primarily the elderly because there was, supply restrictions.
Yes, I remember.
I think it was like 3,000 deaths already reported on the VAERS system. 46% of those deaths were occurring on the day of vaccination or on day 1 or day 2 following vaccination. So within 2 days of vaccination, 46% of those deaths were occurring within that time frame. Now, we were given to the elderly. They're more susceptible to the vaccine injuries. But I was with Francis Collins, the head of NIH, with a group of senators. Everybody else was patting themselves on the back. We got the test kits out there, and great job. And of course, I'm the skunk in the room going, Dr. Collins, are you watching VAERS? And I gave him those stats, and he goes, Senator, we've attributed 6 deaths of childbearing age women associated with J&J with clotting, 6 deaths. So what about the other thousands? And he just very callously said, well, Senator, people die. And that's pretty much the attitude that the CDC and our health agencies have been given to vaccine injuries ever since. When we held that event in June 2021 with the vaccine injured, at that point, all they wanted was to be seen and heard and believed so that they could get treatment. Because they were all being blown off. They still are. The medical establishment does not recognize vaccine injuries. So these people horribly injured, so horribly injured that dozens have committed suicide. They're in such utter despair. By the way, even greater despair when Facebook shut down their support groups. Now they had nobody to talk to. No, Jillian, I could go on. I'll quit filibustering.
Well, no, what you've done.
None of this made sense. It was all outrageous to me.
You've given me so much to unpack. So if you're okay, I want to go back to the beginning and ask a few questions about each point you made. So you've got Princess Cruises. I remember that. That was a cruise ship that we couldn't bring in because they had COVID on the boat. That was very early, correct, sir?
Right. That was, again, I brought in John Ioannidis in May, so it was before that. It's probably like March or April.
Okay.
He collected the data, he analyzed it and said it's going to be like, like a bad flu season in terms of infection fatality rate. If you're elderly, if you have certain comorbidities, be worried about it. But if you're healthy, you'll probably be just fine. But
then, Senator, President Trump said that as well at the time. And everybody said he was a buffoon, he was crazy. We were seeing videos of people dropping dead in the streets in China and hearing horror stories from the hospital. So question 1, what do you think was the percentage of death? I've heard it's actually less than 1% now from people who had caught COVID. Am I accurate there?
Yes, it's well under that.
Okay.
It's like 0.1%. Just somewhere in the 0.1, 0.2, maybe even below that. If you're under 70, it's like 0.07%, I think is one of the most recent numbers I've seen. So, in the end, it was somewhere around a bad flu season. Again, we don't have best figures even on flu. I mean, this is, governments don't do the best job really gathering this data, but that's as good as we have. It was nothing to freak out. I mean, we have people that claim there wasn't even a pandemic, that's not how a pandemic would spread. Again, who do you believe nowadays? That's part of the problem. Is science has been completely corrupted.
Right. Okay, so then here's my second question. If you were able to extrapolate that it would be a low percentage of victims and you would have acted accordingly. Like maybe we would have quarantined the elderly or the morbidly obese, or we took away what you were able to extrapolate from Princess Cruises, which turns out to be quite accurate. And we can't say hindsight's 2020 because you were saying this then and it turned out to be true. Why was the NIH and Fauci and Collins and all of those people, why were they not seeing the same things you were? And subsequently, were the people on the streets that we're watching just drop dead in China, was that fake? What the hell was that then?
That might have been. I mean, that's where I started assuming out of China, that was just a PSYOPs operation out of China. Okay, but set that aside.
Okay.
First of all these, the Fauci of the world, they had access to all this information. And again, this is Oxford's Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. They were writing their, predictions of the, case fatality and then infection fatality rate. I mean, this was all early on, same with Johnny Ioannidis. I would say go back to an event held at the Milken Institute with Rick Bright, who was the fellow who sabotaged the use of hydroxychloroquine, so people didn't have access to it, and Anthony Fauci. So they're in this Milken Institute bemoaning the fact that we don't have a universal vaccination program. And, I think as Fauci said, flu vaccine, flu itself just isn't enough to prompt people so that we have like pretty much 100% coverage of everybody getting a flu vaccine. In order to have a universal vaccination program, probably going to take something like a pandemic. Again, this is October 2019. A couple weeks later, coincidentally or not, you have this event 201, by Avril Haines, led by Avril Haines. The whole point about that is talking about in case of a pandemic or some kind of biological instance, a big problem is going to be misinformation.
Oh my God.
So we're going to have to figure out how to battle misinformation. And so that's where you have Trusted News Initiative. By the way, not to plug somebody else's podcast, but on the flight over to DC here, literally just an hour or two ago, I listened to the full 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast interview with Michael Benz, who puts a lot of this together as well. But by the way, God bless podcasters. I mean, God bless you folks that are coming on here, holding lengthened interviews so you can start getting into some of these issues in real depth. Okay, you're providing truth, or certainly what we believe is truth. Right. And again, nobody has a corner on the truth, but you're starting to open up people's eyes in terms of what has been happening in this world. And it's all quite confusing. I don't have all the answers, but hopefully we're trying to provide some, at least getting people to ask questions, not just blindly accept what we hear on the major networks, what we hear on the social media companies. People are starting to ask questions. It is the silver lining in COVID, by the way, that it has opened up people's eyes to the lies that have been told by those in authority for decades.
Senator, you are on something called the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, which is the most powerful investigatory body in the U.S. Senate, and you have the strongest subpoena power. And you are sitting here telling me and my audience that you're still looking for answers, that you're trying to get to the truth. Do you know how crazy that sounds to a regular citizen?
So first of all, let me tell you the progression of this. So I had been chairman of the full committee, Homeland Security, Governmental Affairs, which is actually not as old as the Permanent Subcommittee investigation. Okay.
Right.
So I timed out of that. We lost the majority. So I've been in the minority. I've been the ranking member on the Permanent Subcommittee investigation. This shows you how unserious Congress is in terms of oversight and investigations. I have a large enough budget to have 5 investigators. That's it. 5 people investigating, doing oversight on the entire federal government and beyond. So you're somewhat resource constrained here.
Okay. Yep.
Now I will become chairman of the committee, but it is true. It's been set up as the premier investigatory body of the United States Senate. It has stronger subpoena authority of any committee or subcommittee in Congress. I mean, the House chairmen have unilateral subpoena power, but generally they've got to run that up through the Speaker's office. I don't have to do that. As chairman of the full committee, I would have to get votes from my committee members to issue subpoenas to people, which is why very few went through, because somebody'd always object. Even on my side, by the way. So no, we're in Congress. We're not serious about oversight, largely because we don't want to investigate what we've done. We don't want to investigate these trillions of dollars we misspend every year. So they're not particularly interested in one of their colleagues really blowing the whistle on them.
Got it. Right. Of course, because it does seem a bit like an oxymoron. A committee put together to investigate the body that it's put together from. It. All right. So in other words, you're saying it's very difficult to be as effective as you would like. I'm taking that away from what you're saying here, sir.
To put it mildly, correct.
Okay. Yeah. I want to back up.
But I will say truth has its own power.
Right.
And the public is going to start demanding this. Okay, and I think that's the beauty. Shifting gears a little bit, we can come back, but the event that, and by the way, you did a great job. All you presenters did a great job in the America Health and Nutrition Second Opinion. The public wants to know, why do we have this explosion in chronic illness? Why do we have this explosion in autism? Government agencies don't want to know that.
Right.
Big ag, big food, big pharma, they don't want to know that. As you remember, Dr. Chris Palmer, I think of all your fabulous testimony, I think the one snippet that I keep referring to is when Dr. Chris Palmer, psychiatrist, really doing a lot of research on nutrition and mental health, when he said whoever they is, they don't want to discover the root cause of these things. They don't want to discover that vaccines could be causes. They don't want to discover the seed oils or glyphosate. I have a hard time saying that word.
Me too, glyphosate.
Come up with a better
Dangerous
word. Dangerous
pesticide, everybody. Right, exactly.
Roundup, okay? Because that can completely disrupt their business models. Right. So again, I'm not here indicting anything. What I'm saying is we need to get the research, and we have to have confidence, and we have to return integrity to that research. But anyway, I diverted.
I'm going to get there. I want to go back one more time now, because you've got me pre-COVID with a plan to have a universal vaccine program. So this is beyond the childhood vaccine schedule that exists here in America. This is like, we got to vaccinate the planet. So it's the up button on steroids, check. And then, what do we do when people try to fight back on this? We have the Trusted News Initiative. What is that? I've never even heard of that.
No, that is something, they all got together. And if you've ever seen some of these video clips where all these local news anchors
say the same
are using the exact same words.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media publish things that aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So this is coming from the cartel, from somebody on high, pushing this out through what they had all developed. They've done this in plain sight.
Yep.
They'll hold these conferences, they'll videotape them, they're there. Okay, so you watch it, and then he's believing what they're saying. Yeah. Again, like the Milken Institute, where you've got Rick Brighton and Fauci saying, we need a universal vaccine program. So fast forward to where I'm talking to Novartis, they're pretty excited about maybe having a drug that could end this thing. All of a sudden they go dark. So somewhere they made the decision that, therapeutics treating this need not apply. Because, of course, what you know is you cannot get an emergency use authorization on a untested injection if there is an alternate treatment. That would have tanked. Okay, they never would have got away with this injection.
Right. They couldn't have moved it through the Emergency Use PrEP Act, right? If you had a working therapeutic like ivermectin, for example.
Or hydroxychloroquine or budesonide or corticosteroids, all these things, they were effective. I mean, I will tell you, ivermectin absolutely worked. There were so many people that contacted me. I had the network of doctors who had the courage and compassion to use it, even though their licenses were threatened. Yeah, the COVID cartel didn't have to destroy very many doctors before every other doctor said, I think I want to keep practicing medicine.
Yep.
I need to take care of my family. I need to pay off those student loans. I think I'll shut up.
Trump was part of Operation Warp Speed. So in other words, I bring this up simply because people like to paint these things with a blue brush or a red brush and write them off accordingly. And this has now, Fauci has been in power and reigned over numerous administrations, from what I can tell, be they Republican or Democrat. Trump wanted to bring the American people the vaccine. I'm guessing he obviously had no idea what would come of it, and he was out of office before I think it came out the day after he was out of office and Biden was in office a few days later. So I'm trying to position this so that this isn't like, oh, crazy right-winger, because I'm sure you've experienced that in spades. I've seen you suffer from that narrative in the mainstream media. I want to say, or I would like to go back to this gentleman from Pfizer who said to you, Senator Johnson, I'm deeply concerned about what's in here. Okay, first off, is there something unique within this mRNA vaccine, or would this apply to all the vaccines that have ever existed? Like, why this one, and why is this stuff in there if it was obvious to somebody who worked on vaccines that it was dangerous? It's like, it doesn't compute. Why would anyone do that?
Well, it starts with, this is not a vaccine.
Right.
They literally changed the definition to encompass this. Okay. There are a number of lies told, starting with it's going to stay in your arm. No, we've got this from Japanese regulators, a Pfizer study with rats of the lipid nanoparticle, biodistributes all over the body, concentrates in the ovaries and the adrenal glands elsewhere. Okay, they knew this was going to go all over the body. Why did they lie to us?
Why?
It's not messenger RNA. It's modified RNA. Messenger RNA, the reason they have to encapsulate in the lipid particle is they have to protect the mRNA, because mRNA degrades very quickly in the body.
Right.
This is modified so it doesn't degrade. So they encapsulate it, protect it from being degraded, but it itself doesn't degrade, to the point, I know we have studies where this is still circulating in the body 2 months after injection. Now, they haven't studied beyond there, but we know, normal mRNA, I think, breaks down within hours or days. So it's not real mRNA. So it's put in something that's going to distribute all over the body. It enters the cell. Again, a standard vaccine is either attenuated or a killed virus that the body recognizes.
Right. This is a
and
typical
so your body
vaccine.
responds to it. So if it sees it again, your body's on instant guard, go attack this, okay? This doesn't do that. This enters the cell, takes over the cell, turns it into a manufacturing site to express that spike protein. It's just one small part of the virus.
Yep.
Okay? And then your body expresses that. It's toxic to the body. Again, it's not self. Anything that's not yourself is an enemy of the body. So the body's going to attack it. And when the body attacks itself, that's called inflammation.
Right.
So that's a real problem.
But Senator, why couldn't they do this? My question is, did they need to create something that was this toxic? Like, was that a necessity? Because
this is a wonderful platform, because you literally can design, with our manufacturing capability right now, you can send the genome information to the manufacturing site, and you can basically create a new vaccine overnight.
Oh my God. I see. Oh.
So then they grow this,
right.
They grow whatever this protein is. By the way, just real quick, show you the insanity of this. So Fauci's saying he's not sure whether natural immunity will work.
Uh-huh.
So why did about half of people worldwide that tested positive for the coronavirus, for being exposed, and by the way, the PCR test, that's something, it's not for diagnostics. That way overstated how many people are infected. But anyway, if half of the people got infected, but they showed no symptoms, well, that would imply that your natural immune system took care of it, right?
Right.
Also, what do they think that injection was going to rely on? It was going to trigger your natural immune system to recognize spike protein. But again, how imperfect that is versus your natural immune system. Your natural immune system, if it was once infected by a coronavirus, it's going to recognize an entire coronavirus, even if it's not the same, even if it has a different spike protein. The injection is only going to recognize the spike protein. It's like, instead of recognizing the entire face, just the nose. So it's a very imperfect type of defense.
Senator, let me.
Again, Fauci's out there for the entire year talking down natural immunity. Of course, that's where I really came under fire. Is I wasn't going to get this injection. So some local reporter asked me like about February of 2021, Senator, have you gotten vaccinated? And again, I dodge it by saying, no, listen, there's already a shortage. I'm pretty healthy. I'll let other people get vaccinated first. And then I wanted to say, besides, I've already had COVID asymptomatically. I tested positive, had no symptoms. So I've already got natural immunity. I probably have better immunity than the vaccine is going to give me. That, just created all kinds of problems. And even worse, I went on to say, why are we so arrogant that we think we can create something that will give us better immunity than our God-given immunity? They actually trotted out priests to rip into me.
Wow.
Because I invoke God, our creator, having created this marvel of a natural immunity system, right?
I'm sorry, Senator. I have to laugh because that's so ridiculous. But please, this is crazy, sir. Okay, so let me recap.
I realize this kind of disjointed. We're not doing a very good timeline here. Sorry about that.
No, this is my fault. I'm making you go back because I want to break each thing down. So forgive me. I want to recap real quick to make sure that I've got this here. So we know that the tech is faulty and dangerous. And I will also let you know that I had Brianne Dresden on the show, and I know for a fact, because of having her on as a guest, that the NIH was doing a study on individuals who are vaccine injured while rolling out the vaccine. So it was no secret. That is out there, common knowledge at this point.
But they've continued to hide those studies. I don't think they've published most of them. They've continued to hide those. Okay.
Got it.
So I can quick bring up date and okay. So April, Novartis went dark on hydroxychloroquine.
April 2020.
Okay.
Gotcha.
In May, I held the hearing with Johnny Aeneas. In November, I held a hearing with Peter McCulloch and Harvey Risch and George Fareed on hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
This is where they trotted out Ajit Jha and just ripped into all of us. This is where the New York Times wrote an article that snake oil salesman in the Senate.
Right. Yes. Anti-science Luddites. Yes.
The next month I held, I didn't care. Next month I held the hearing with Pierre Corey, who had his manuscript on ivermectin. Pierre thought, pandemic's over. We've got all the evidence. Ivermectin works. Don't worry. Again, this is all before the emergency use authorization on the vaccine. They censored Pierre Corey's powerful opening statement. So they tanked hydroxychloroquine. They had to tank ivermectin.
Yep.
You've got the famous exchange between, I think it was Andrew Hill and Tess Lawrie, where he was tasked with determining, doing a study on ivermectin. His conclusion was, yeah, it works, but that's not what he wrote in his report.
Right.
Because he was going to get $30 million. He got $30 million grant from Fauci. No, it's just unbelievable.
Okay.
You put the timeline of this together, it's just unbelievably corrupt. So they had to tank any early treatment. It was all for the vaccine. Once they committed the vaccine, they had to cover up all the harms.
Right.
So and again, once they saw the harm, they can't admit that they were wrong. They can't admit that these people died, that people are permanently disabled. They can't admit that Brianne Dresden, got driven to the point of, she'd committed to suicide, as so many of her other vaccine-injured individuals did. They did commit suicide. They can't, and they still won't admit it. So here they get the House report, which about the only thing missing from those hearings was brought to you by Pfizer.
Right.
They've got to say, to save millions of lives. They award a Nobel Prize to the people who developed the mRNA technology.
Right. But they
saved 14 million lives.
mRNA.
They just pulled that number out of the air. There's nothing to back that up other than some model, some mathematical model. But show me the science that actually proves he saves 14 million lives.
There's nothing to back that up. Nothing.
Yeah, it's just made up.
It's in a million different articles. Oh, it saved lives. Oh, it lessened the cases.
They just did a little mathematical progression or something like that, as opposed to Ed Dowd and Dennis Rancourt, who are looking at death statistics And they see that these excess deaths are coinciding perfectly with the role of the vaccine, which, by the way, they've kind of gone away now, except for maybe starting to increase in cancers because of the DNA contamination with the SV40 sequence in it.
Okay, hold on. We got to get back to that one. Yeah. We got to get back to that. The DNA. Hold on. That's what I'm going to make you break down for me in a second. So, okay. So I remember being solicited to have a podcast and about the vaccine and have a scientist on, and it's mRNA tech. It's been around for 30 years. Now you're saying, no, it wasn't actually mRNA tech. Great. It was supposed to trigger your body's immune response, which your body would do naturally once it recognizes a virus it's already had, and it would recognize the entire viral sequence, your body's natural immunity created by God or nature or source or evolution or whatever you'd like to call it. Then they got a priest to attack you, which is funny, Senator, if we could just look back. Sorry, sir. That's absurd. Then they designed this thing that only looks at one part of the spike protein, which is arguably potentially one of the reasons it wasn't very efficacious. Now, the collective they, okay, I don't even imagine we could put together the theys here. What is there? Oh, sorry. And the reason they do this is because it's kind of like a vaccine mold. So we can manufacture these things now very cheaply, very quickly for our next pandemic and our next pandemic and our next pandemic. So it's very cost effective to have the tech, albeit dangerous, function in this capacity. Now we have to hide it. All right, great. So it's obviously about hundreds of millions of dollars, but here's where it's a bit confusing, sir. And I was wondering if you could provide some clarity. We all know that the drug companies are profiting hundreds of millions year over year over year, would presume billions, eventually maybe one day trillions. But the patent piece, I don't understand exactly. So the NIH also shares a patent on these vaccines. And then what would the individual researchers, like the day that Fauci goes to meet his maker, what would be his incentive personally? Like, why is he part of the collective they and Collins and Morenz, all these guys at the NIH, what are they getting out of it?
So that also would be a $64,000 question. They don't disclose that. I come from the private sector. I can incentivize people to do good things, but that's obviously a real conflict of interest and the corruption of the process. Even barring the royalties, the revolving door between the agencies and the pharmaceutical companies, they don't get paid as much as they can get paid in the big business. So right. You got Gottlieb going to Pfizer. You've got, all these former FDA, and they all go into private sector business. Same military industrial complex generals end up going to Lockheed, that type of thing. It's just a complete corruption of the process that we've let them get away with.
So the NIH, what do they have to do with the hundreds of millions? Like I saw a settlement where the NIH went after Moderna and said, hey, we share this vaccine patent. You owe us money. They got hundreds of millions of dollars from Moderna. What are they doing with that money? And then is it true that we don't know what they're doing with that? Okay.
Yeah, but by and large, again, I've only got 5 people to investigate. It's a target-rich environment. So it is very difficult. Again, what's grotesque to think about this is all being driven by a profit motive. Think of the cost to society of the pandemic. Literally trillions. Forget the dollar cost. What about the hundreds of thousands of people died because they didn't get early treatment when they could have had it? Or if Dennis Rancourt is right, the millions that were killed by the vaccine or permanently disabled. So, to think literally that some individuals drove this, make a few $1 billion in profits for their companies or a couple $100 million for themselves in terms of a big payout. It's really sick. It's really evil if that's the motivation when you can consider the harm. But again, why aren't they fessing up to it? Why is this so hard to uncover? It's because the body count is too high.
Wow.
The damages are just unspeakable. Nobody is willing to admit to that.
I personally have done some homework on this over the years, and I do believe that Fauci needs to be in jail. And I'd like for you to jump down my throat and tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong here.
I'd love to see him in an orange jumpsuit. Love to see it.
Sir, you have said that you have been trying for 3 years to get his emails unredacted, and I'm assuming you're still unsuccessful in that endeavor?
Yeah, and notice the House Subcommittee on the coronavirus, I'm not sure they even subpoenaed them. I don't think they, we keep asking them, do you have them? Get no response. So, I mean, that'll be the first subpoena I'll issue.
The ones that I have read between David Morenz, who I believe was Fauci's right hand, and the gentleman, Peter, I think, Daszak at Eco Health Alliance, that they gave the grant to create COVID at Wuhan, they go back and forth in these emails talking about how they all work to avoid FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. And it's like, oh, we've got a person here who makes these emails go away and makes the FOIA requests go away. And Tony's got a back channel. Don't worry about Tony Fauci. He'll never get caught in this stuff. And then the guy goes so far to say to Daszak, gives him another grant, I believe in August, for another like $8 or $9 million, and says, whoa, so much money. Is it all for you? And asks for a kickback. And Daszak says he'll give him one. That alone, sir, I cannot understand why. So not only are they asking for kickbacks from government grants to do gain of function research, which is a separate conversation unto itself, but they also get royalties as individuals, and we don't know how much. So I've seen that Senator Rand Paul was trying to get some transparency on, okay, if you worked on this vaccine, you guys get royalties individually, not just the NIH. You personally get paid. How much? We don't know. They don't have to disclose it. And then, oops, I don't want to admit I'm wrong, and we've killed millions of people around the world. We've destroyed lives, ruined businesses. Kids have lost education, and it's for money and ego. I'm right. Did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong? Is it as bad as I just said?
If not worse.
Okay. So, Senator, now let's get to these. I was really hoping you were going to tell me. Sometimes people are like, no, Jill, let's not put our tin hat on. But it's all there. It's all right there. So, okay. Sorry. So now we're going to get back to the vaccine injuries. Here's the narrative, as I'm sure you well know, and I've tried to look into this myself, and the narrative is as follows in the counter argument. If you got COVID, you'd be sicker. Let's see. Hundreds of millions of people around the world, billions of people got the vaccine. They're fine. A vaccine injury is typical and nominal. It saved millions of lives, and that's everywhere, because I've gotten in individuals who I've now started to debate the efficacy of these vaccines with. I get the articles from Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins and this incredible medical institution and that incredible medical school. Oh, the vaccine, it's very efficacious. And, even if you get it, your case is mitigated. This is out there big time. So now anybody who turns around and says, I don't know about this doesn't seem safe, is a moron who's trying to drag us back to the dark ages when we thought the earth was flat. None of that's true that I just said. None of that counter argument is true.
Well, first of all, go back to the fact that you have to get a booster every 6 months. Is that a normal vaccine? You have to keep boosted all the time? There is study after study after study that are showing in some cases the vaccines have negative effectiveness. After about the third dose, there are studies that show that it boosts your IgG4, which is the antibody that suppresses the body's reaction. That's what allergists try and drive up in people with allergies so that they don't react to pollen or whatever. They try and drive up your IgG4, which is an anti-immune response. And so it holds down your immune system so it doesn't react to an allergen. So that's not good. I think it's still true. The number one adverse event for getting the COVID shot is getting COVID itself. Right. So you notice how their stories changed all along the way. It's good. If you get the vaccine, you're not going to get sick. You're not going to get hot. You're not going to die. Well, then pretty soon, no, it doesn't It doesn't prevent transmission. Remember, the whole purpose of this thing, if the vaccine was so effective, why do you care if somebody else gets it or not? Mm-hmm. They're not risking your life because you're vaccinated. You're safe.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
But we got to get everybody vaccinated. Why, if it was so damn effective? Well, first of all, it wasn't. Now, then we find out, then next year, you got to do it so you don't transmit it to grandma. Then we find out they never tested it against not transmitting, and it doesn't prevent transmission. It didn't prevent hospitalization. It didn't prevent death. It didn't work.
So all this stuff that you're reading, that it does do all those things, who put that narrative out there?
I think it all starts with the fact that don't we all want to believe that we can be so brilliant that we can come up with something to prevent a particular disease? And again, I think maybe in some cases we can. But I don't know how many of those cases. I do know from reading, like, for example, Dissolving Illusions, the vast majority of the reduction of all these infection diseases didn't come once the vaccines were rolled out. It became because we stopped living in squalor. We dramatically improved sanitation.
Yeah.
So if you look at the charts going back to the 1900s where people did live in squalor, we didn't have proper sanitation, the dramatic reduction in all these infection diseases, then the vaccines came on. I think it's true. Read Turtles All the Way Down, a very, very even-handed book. I think some of these vaccines actually did help, complete some of the eradication of these diseases, but not all. But all along the way, we completely ignore the types of vaccine adverse events that occur. So you can't come up with an accurate cost-benefit analysis on this thing.
You said,
again, so
sorry.
It just seems like such an elegant solution. We've got something. We give you a shot, and you're not going to get the disease. But the problem is, it's not true. I mean, my wife right now is suffering from shingles. She's had 3 shingles shots. She had the original one. She got the latest 2-course. She's suffering from shingles right now. So what COVID has done is open up our eyes.
Right.
All of this, and why do we push more and more vaccines? Well, it goes back to that 1986 bill that Gates, once they got a hold of that bill and then added some regulation, absolved vaccine manufacturers of all liability. What a great business model. We can keep pushing these things through. We never test the vaccines on the childhood schedule against a true placebo. So you're testing this vaccine against another vaccine. So if you have adverse events to this one and the new one doesn't have greater adverse events, well, it's safe and effective, just like the first one that's never been tested against true placebo either. And that is one of the revelations. Bobby Kennedy, Fauci kept saying, "Oh no, we've tested these things. I got the studies against true placebo. Well, show them to me." We've never tested any of the vaccines in the childhood schedule against a true placebo. It's an analogy would be testing hemlock versus arsenic.
And seeing which is worse. Sir, when you look this stuff up, this is the part that is just so hard to wrap your head around. I wish I could point someone to a place to prove it, because when somebody goes, well, that's ridiculous. They say they do robust data, and you watch the news and they're like, we do robust data and Kennedy's nuts. But then I personally thought, something, I want to understand this. Let me go to the FDA's website. And I followed through an exercise where I tried to find out what safety studies were done on hepatitis B vaccine. 3 studies, 147 kids total, and they were monitored for 5 days after each injection. And then later they continued to see if the antibody was there. So that, yes, they monitored it to see if the antibody was still in the human body of the children they gave the vaccination to. But that was it. But Senator, then couldn't somebody turn around and sue, saying that is not the truth? In other words, that's not robust safety testing. That is not the gold standard of scientific testing. And the narrative, I mean, you could go to any chatbot, you could go to any major legacy news channel, and they will tell you that this is crazy and they are robustly tested. How is that possible? The only thing, sir, people are going to have the hardest time wrapping their head around how this lie can infiltrate all the major medical institutions, all the legacy news channels. How?
So again, science has been corrupted. And Eisenhower warned us about this. He warned us about, in his farewell address, not only the military-industrial complex, but he said government funding of science will corrupt it because you get the result you pay for. So most science is either funded by government or, in the case of drug studies, the pharmaceutical companies themselves.
Right.
Okay. In the case of, GMO seeds from the seed companies. In the case of pesticides and herbicides from those chemical companies. So science has been corrupted. The next level of corruption when it comes to drugs is pharmaceutical ads. And, Jillian, I come from the private sector. I'm all for free speech. Until my eyes were opened up, I would have been totally opposed to banning pharmaceutical ads. But now I know exactly why they advertise. I mean, you see these ads on TV, right? I have no idea what those drugs are for. I just know, people play Frisbee and they're swimming and they're having a great deal of time playing with their dogs, right? And then you hear the tail end of those ads, and it's just horrible side effects that they buzz through really quick, which is just a portion of what they really have to disclose on the insert. And you have to, why would anybody spend billions of dollars advertising drugs that the consumer has no idea what they're talking about, but it sure sounds scary to take that drug, but your medical professional will determine whether. The only reason they advertise is to control the narrative.
Right.
So that is what they've done. They've bought and paid for the narrative, which is why a guy like me doesn't get invited on some of these shows to talk about this subject. Invite me on to talk about Hunter Biden, but they don't really want to drive me, run me down the path of tell us what you know about the corruption of our federal health agencies and how it relates to COVID and the vaccine injury. It would be rare for me to be able to give them the opportunity. So, we held that event in June of 2021 with the vaccine injured Bree and Maddie and, Cheryl Rutgers and Candace and Christy. I was hoping, we had about a dozen cameras there. I was hoping there'd be some measure of sympathy from the reporters, but they're primarily wondering, well, Ken Rutgers, you just doing this for money? Do you want to sue somebody? No. We want these people to be able to get treatment, to have their injuries taken seriously.
Right.
But again, the media, they didn't want to go there, and they still don't want to go there.
You've said that 70% of the results in most studies can't be replicated.
Yeah. So so this actually comes from a survey, and I want to make this very clear because that's probably not exactly right.
Okay.
So in 2016, Nature magazine had a survey of, I think, 1,500 researchers. 70% of those researchers said they could not reproduce data from other studies. About half of them couldn't reproduce data from their own studies. And yet they publish them because there's so much pressure in academia for people to publish. So that's the whole game. You got to publish. Peer review is a joke. The vast majority of peer reviewers never look at the data.
What?
Some of the data is not even made available to them. Peer reviewers do it kind of on a volunteer basis. They do it for their own reasons. I mean, they may be trying to tank somebody else's research, which is contrary to what their research is. Peer review is a complete joke. And yet that's the gold standard.
I was just going to say, Senator, I think I've written in at least 2 books that don't even consider a study unless it's peer reviewed.
What I would like to see is I'd like to see panels of people from every side of the issue. If you're talking about health and nutrition, I want agricultural interests there with chemical companies, there with the seed companies, there with people like you that are look at the science and go, that looks accurate to me. I guess I was wrong. I guess I was, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Somehow we have to establish that type of process. I would have hoped that government could have done that, but they didn't. They've been corrupted. They get captured by the agents, the very corporate interests, the very individuals they're designed to protect the public against.
Yes.
They get captured by those agencies. And that's what I think Bobby Kennedy is going to be able to uncover. And that's what has to be uncovered. And then we got to figure out a system where you actually have integrity in science and review of this research, where we can, as best as possible, again, it's science. The most unscientific term I can think of is scientific consensus.
Okay, I get it. So people from all sides come together and they have to agree on something without an agenda, and they're independent, meaning they don't profit. They don't have a conflict of interest. It doesn't behoove them in any way by killing somebody else's product because it helps their own, or they're working on it and they benefit off of it financially, like I'm a person at the NIH financially benefiting off of the vaccine. Therefore, I kill biologics.
Almost everybody's going to have a vested interest. Almost everybody's going to have an agenda. Fine. That's why you need the people from the different perspectives.
Right. I see. Yes.
So I understand.
Keep each other accountable.
You're advocating for farmers. I want to advocate for farmers. I want to be able to grow abundant food but I also want it nutritious. And I don't want to have toxins in it. Okay. But definitely want farmers to succeed. Definitely want food producers to succeed. Definitely want consumer advocates there at the table, making sure that the science is accurate.
Well, you bring me to the panel you held on health, a second opinion that I was fortunate enough to be invited to. Thank you, sir. You expanded, obviously, your concern from COVID and the health of Americans into general wellness, being farming, food, and pharma. Boy, you really put yourself in the crosshairs there. Sir, I'm grateful for your advocacy. You have no idea, but you're kind of an unlikely hero here. I did not see that coming. So what in the world made you decide to jump in front of this bus?
Kind of like Bobby Kennedy, he never really went to advocate for, children and the vaccine schedule. It was kind of thrust on him. The stories I've heard it is, he's an environmental lawyer. He gives, obviously famous, he gives talks on the environment, and, speech after speech, there'd be a bunch of moms sitting in the front row, I think some kind of T-shirt on, talking about their vaccine in your child. And, he just kind of kept him at arm's length until one of those moms found out where he lived, came with the stack of science, said, I'm not going to leave till you read it. To his credit, he read it. And to his further credit, he couldn't close his eyes. He couldn't turn their backs on him. And I'm saying, I came here because we're mortgaging our kids' future. I came here as an advocate for freedom, which is the essential ingredient, which is government is primarily designed to protect us, safety, security, and protect our freedom. Not solve all our problems, not mortgage our children's future. Okay, that's why I came here. I didn't come here to investigate things, but all of a sudden, I'm investigating, and then during COVID in particular, nobody else is holding these hearings. Right. Homeland Security, Government Affairs, that's not exactly the place where you'd call in the FDA director or commissioner and talk about the fact that we don't do active pharmaceutical ingredients. We don't do the precursor chemicals. This is a vulnerability to our Homeland Security. I mean, that was really my first entry. This is a threat to our security because we don't do this anymore. That was in February 2020. But then as I'm just seeing all the insanity here, it's like, okay, what are we talking about early treatment? Why are people attacking hydroxychloroquine? Okay, just because the orange man said it might work? That Trump said, really we're gonna ignore something that might work and trash it? So again, that didn't make sense to me. Then again, I'm talking to Novartis, and they're excited about this. So you have all these studies coming out in May. I start calling, you won't even talk to me anymore. So again, you just start getting suspicious. You see these things happening. You see the corruption.
Right.
And I couldn't close my eyes to it. And so you fast forward to this thing. Okay, so I again, COVID opened my eyes as it opened up millions of other eyes. Mm-hmm. Well, let's assume this is probably not a one-off, where you have the big pharma capturing and corrupting that process. Well, you get somebody like Bobby Kennedy leading, going, why do you have this explosion in chronic illness? I've been asking for a long time. Autism. I'm not, and we all started this. I'm not anti-vax. I'm not. I've got all these vaccines. Don't think I'm going to get any more. Right. Just being honest. So again, you start asking the questions, and when you find out you can't even ask the question, right, without they destroying you. You can't even ask the question, which is why I go back to Chris Palmer. They don't want to discover the root cause. It's going to disrupt their business model. Again, it may save us trillions in healthcare, but they're not going to make their billion. It's sick.
Right.
And that's what government is supposed to protect us against. Make sure that the trillions of dollars, that the health of the nation comes before protecting the profit of the corporation. But again, when you get individuals involved, they can be corrupted for dimes and nickels. It's costing society billions. It's sick.
You have just said that in such a way that I have tried to comprehend this my whole life and thought, like, how much money do you need? My God, like, you're already very wealthy, very comfortable. How many people will you sell out? Like, how do you meet your maker? Quite honestly, you would have to believe in absolutely nothing. You'd have to be a pure nihilist to do these kinds of things and jeopardize the health of millions of innocent people for dimes and nickels. My God, Senator. It's disturbing.
But all the people involved are not necessarily evil. But they just don't see the big picture. I mean, they get hired to do a job.
Okay.
Your job is, we're hiring you for our food company, and we're a great food company, and we make excellent tasting cereal and it's nutrition, all that kind of stuff. Boy, I mean, these people here are going to destroy our business model. Go talk to Congress. Tell them the facts. Tell them the GMO is the exact same thing. Don't worry the fact that we don't really have studies saying it's exactly the same, that the human microbiome aren't impacted by this. I mean, I don't know. So again, I think most of the players are just, they're ordinary citizens. They're just they got a job. They're trying to get a salary. They're trying to take care of their kids.
Right. I get it.
But it is the powerful interests. Mm-hmm. It's the people with power that then can manipulate the information. And it all gets down to, and which is why I continue to blame the media on almost all these things. If we had an unbiased media, uncorrupted media that held everybody accountable, there was suspicious or of Republican as much as a Democrat, are suspicious of big business. I mean, we need a free press, but it has to be suspicious of everybody. It's got to hold everybody accountable. It's got to be inquisitive. It's got to look. That doesn't make sense. When they see trends, they start relentlessly pursuing. We have to get to the bottom of this rise in autism. And by the way, I did. Trump was on the weekend programs spouting. Let me give you the real numbers on autism. Okay,
yes, please.
The supportable numbers. Okay. So back in 2000, which is when the CDC really came up with kind of the definition of autism, 1 in 150. So that's 24 years ago. 1 in 150 people were diagnosed with autism, okay?
Okay.
Then by 2012, that was 1 in 69, using the exact same definition of autism. What they did is they actually tried to narrow the definition of autism.
Oh, I get it. Because I was like, wasn't that much higher? I thought, but I see.
No, in 2000, they attempted to actually narrow the definition. So there weren't so many cases reported. Okay.
Oh my God. Okay.
That didn't reduce the number. The ratio continued to reduce. So now we're 1 in 36. So we went from 150 with one definition. Now under a narrow definition, which actually would have produced less diagnoses, we're down to 1 in 36. In California, it's 1 in 22. So those are the CDC numbers, and that's as good as I can go on right now.
Senator,
so it's still an alarming rate that.
No,
again,
it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
That asks the question gets vilified.
Right. And what's interesting is when I had Dr. Casey Means on, who was also at your hearing, she was explaining that there's no way to do research to figure out the exact thing. It's impossible because there's so many different factors. Is it the food dye and a vaccine? Is it all the vaccines? Oh, it's this much glyphosate is safe in that amount. But what about the cumulative effect of that much glyphosate and that much food coloring and this many shots of doses of vaccines? There's no way to actually get to the bottom of it, which at some point you would have to say, okay, we've got a problem. what's dangerous case by case and start eliminating. But because of this corruption, that's not happening. I want to just encapsulate real quick before moving on how these things are being corrupted for people. So all the checks and balances of a free press that's supposed to hold the government and corporate America accountable, they're being bought off via advertising dollars. Accurate?
I think that's largely true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact breakdown, but I mean, the percentage of pharma ads of the total spend by is very high percentage. And then beyond that, it's probably big food and,
yep,
big beverage.
So zero incentive. And in fact, quite the opposite, given instruction to present a glowing review of things like Ozempic and the vaccine and so on and so forth. So we can't rely on that institution of trust that we were previously able to.
So the root cause is government. Don't rely on government to fix this problem.
Oh,
it'll always be captured. It'll always be taken over. Okay.
Got it.
The solution really lie. I come from the manufacturing background. Independent certification companies like ISO certification. You have competing ones. They're going to be certifying their businesses, but they're going to make sure that those other certifying operations aren't breaking the rules. I mean, this is how I would handle, for example, organic. Rather than have a government agency that's going to get captured, and they have. I mean, different states do different things because to advantage their farmers, they'll get in seed, for example, or feed from China, still call it organic, even though they're not finding that out. Okay,
right.
So government's a problem. There's a different perspective on this too. I mean, on the one hand, I want to be careful that government, we don't give them so much power they restrict the advancement of knowledge and products, and all chemicals aren't bad.
Of course,
drugs.
Yes, I understand.
Are toxic at a different dose. I mean,
yes.
they're poisonous. I mean, they can save a life, but you give too much, and all of a sudden it's a killer. Same thing with chemicals. I mean, at a certain level, it can provide abundant food safely.
Yeah.
At too high a level, but again, it's
balance.
It's a chemical, and it obviously can kill weeds and pests. At too high a level, can do harm to the body. But again, the body is a marvelous thing that rids ourselves of toxins all the time. So again, you have to have a balanced approach. I don't expect that you listen to my opening statement, but I think the most important. I wouldn't have if I had been sitting there.
Did.
But
I did, sir. It was excellent.
My final paragraph, I think, and I've said this in other of these panels, it's a marvel how much knowledge we've accumulated and how rapidly we're accumulating it. I mean, it's exponential. Mm-hmm. But as much as we know, what we don't know vastly exceeds what we do. And I think that is absolutely true. I mean, you're talking about, okay, so we can look at vaccines and autism. Okay, but is it vaccine with a certain genetic component with, these pests, again, we just don't know. The body is so complex. And as I've gotten involved in this, I mean, I just have an awe and wonder. I mean, we talked about, okay, they test antibodies, but that's just the first line. What really, T cells and B cells, I don't understand. All I know is just wow, what a marvelous. I mean, creation is marvelous. And so again, we have to not only have that respect for creation, but we also have that humility and modesty in terms of, I think this could be a problem, but I'm not so sure.
Right.
And that's why I want everybody's around the table. You're never going to get all the perspectives around it. Trying to put pressure on the process and then understanding, you'll kind of reach a consensus for the moment, but don't be vilifying the outlier there that comes in and says, the world really isn't flat. Sure is. No, it really isn't. I mean, here's my evidence for that. Okay. So again, I've got a very open mind. I've got a great deal of respect for my level of ignorance. Let's put it that way.
So you're basically
by the way, that quote will be used against me.
You know what? All that means is that you're making a difference, Senator. That's all it means is you're ruffling the right feathers, sir. I want to ask you about another way in which you expose corruption, and it's somewhat unrelated, but I find it very confusing. And it has to do with government agencies like the FBI and the CIA getting involved in the election. Like, you've been accused of Russian disinformation years ago with the Steele dossier and the Russia hoax. But subsequently, I believe it was the FBI that told the legacy media not to put out the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. I don't understand this. Can you give this to me in a nutshell? And why does it seem to lean center left? That's what I really don't get.
Well, there are definitely partisan actors in government. Generally, if you're conservative, you don't want anything to do with government. You just don't. So, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to populate government agencies with the conservatives. We want to do the private sector thing and
I get
rich off of, okay. Liberals like government, and so they want to populate it. So it's not surprising that there wouldn't be a bias inside agencies in terms of people that are left-leaning. I mean, what is obvious is we have some pretty hard partisans, particularly at the tops of these agencies. I think most of the line people, they're just, again, they're doing what lobbyists for businesses are. They've got hired for a job and they do their job. And not a whole lot of
somebody
idea.
from the FBI is being lobbied by somebody from private business?
No. I'm just saying that most people inside the agencies aren't.
Okay.
They're not really particularly partisan. They may lean left, but it's the people at the top that are hard partisans. And so, specifically the issue you're looking at is the FBI. They took possession of Hunter Biden's laptop in December 2019.
Right.
So they authenticated it then. They knew it was real.
Right.
They immediately started running an operation to sabotage its disclosure, including a unsolicited secure briefing with Chuck Grassley and I in August, where they said we were targets of Russian disinformation to dissuade us from our investigation. We had our ranking members, Democrat senators, issue a minority report saying that we were soliciting disseminating Russian disinformation. Total false charge. So fast forward to when we issued our report, and there's not been a word of it disputed. We were actually offered Hunter Biden's laptop the day after we issued that report because John Paul McIsaac felt safe enough now. Because on the way out the door in December 2019, after the FBI agent sees it, they basically looked around and said, hey, it's our experience that people that don't talk about these things don't get hurt, don't get in trouble. So that scared him until he saw a Senate report. All of a sudden he felt brave enough. Well, if senators look at this, I can give this laptop to them. Here's where the sabotage works. So we're being accused by the media, by our Republican or Democrat ranking members, and then in that briefing by the FBI of soliciting disseminating Russian disinformation. That sounded like a pretty odd story. I've got Hunter Biden's laptop. It's full of all kinds of crap. Here it is, Senator. So again, we do our due diligence. So we did the responsible thing. We went to the FBI. What do you know about this? I mean, is this stolen goods? Is this a Russian information operation? What is it? We didn't take possession of it. They gave us the runaround for a week. So the guy in charge of this, he's on vacation until McIsaac got impatient enough that he turned it over to Rudy Giuliani's attorney, who then turned it over to the New York Post, and the rest is history.
Oh, wow.
Fast forward, that gets made public. Now you've got 51 officials, former intelligence agency officials, that were asked by Anthony Blinken, our current Secretary of State, working for the Biden administration or Biden campaign, contacts people in the CIA, Mike Morrell, former acting director of the CIA. Hey, can you write a letter to tank this, to say that this is Russian disinformation? Absolutely, I can do that. So they round up 51 former intel agencies, part of the blob, to write this letter saying that this laptop, even though the FBI knows this is authenticated, okay? Biden knew it. Anthony Blinken had to know it. Okay, they know what Hunter's been doing. Biden's been paying him tens of thousands of dollars to get him out of hock while he's paying for sex trafficked women and his drug habit. So they get 51 former intelligence agencies, both Republican and Democrat, because it's the uniparty when it comes to this kind of stuff, to write that letter. The greatest single bit of election interference in my lifetime. That turned the tide of that election. Trump would have won had that, had that been disclosed.
How is no one going to jail for this? I'm sorry, sir. This is like a movie. And the thing is, it comes out. That's what's even crazier. Like, if you go back 50 years and you look at what happened in the 2020 election, then it's like, oh, did you know that there was this laptop? Oh my God. Like, we still don't know what happened at JFK. Like, does this come out 50 years later? It's out. It's like, yeah, we lied. We messed with a little bit.
The whole Russian collusion hoax was just that. I mean, the Steele dossier was bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Obama knew it. Biden knew it. They all knew it. They knew that the subsource for the Steele dossier was somebody the FBI was investigating as a Russian spy. They knew that. They knew it in 2016, and yet they still opened up a special counsel. Under Christopher Wray, the FBI came and briefed Senate Intel, said the Steele dossier had integrity. They knew all that. Now it's all known to the media that was a complete lie, bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Has any major news media apologized for carrying that false narrative, that lie?
No, they still
Has
perpetuate
anybody
it.
come and apologized to me for saying I've been soliciting Russian disinformation? All these things that I've been accused of carrying conspiracy theorists, they're all true. They've not proven one thing, whether it's on COVID, all the things I've been talking about here. I'm just telling you the truth. It's not that I don't make mistakes, but I mean, what I've been telling people since I got involved in these investigations, it's all been true. I don't get any apologies. The Washington Post hasn't returned its Pulitzer Prize for the Russian collusion hoax. I mean, that was massive election interference. They put this country through political turmoil. This lasted to this day. So but they are controlled. Again, you have leftist partisans in these agencies. That's why nobody's in jail. That's why nobody's being held accountable. If the tables were turned and this kind of was done by the Republicans,
jail.
Again, just like Peter Navarro went to jail, just like Steve Bannon went to jail.
Right.
Contempt of Congress. I mean, we held Eric Holder in contempt. He never went to jail. Mayorkas was held in contempt. He never got prosecuted. But Republicans get prosecuted and they get put to jail.
Is that going to change? Here's the thing. Here's the game. Trump gets in office and he puts people in jail, and then he's weaponizing the government and he's a dictator.
He's going to get a charge of retribution, even though.
And it's like I want to see these people pay, and yet that if he does that, he'll be crucified, and it'll be like, oh my God, he's Mussolini, and you're gonna. Is there any way forward to stop this? Because it seems to me the only way this stuff stops is when someone goes to jail for it. When somebody pays.
It starts with exposure. I mean, to me, the number one part of a component of accountability is exposing people. I mean, we expose Hillary Clinton for lying. We exposed her for holding those emails and lying about it and destroying them and all that kind of stuff. She was held accountable by the electorate, even though James Comey corruptly decided not to have her prosecuted, although it's not his call. She was held accountable, and Trump, to his credit,
let it go.
He would, in a fair trial, she would have gone to jail. What she did was criminal, but Trump said, "Listen, that's third world country. That's banana republic. We're going to let sleeping dogs lie. The American people, they decided." So again, but it starts with accountability. So let's at least take the sainthood away from Anthony Fauci. Let's get those 50. Again, it's bad enough what we already know between him and Francis Collins, what they try to do to Jay Bhattacharya.
Right.
Yeah, yes. That's in there. But again, the mainstream media doesn't carry the story. That's why I always keep going. As troubling as corruption is of the Biden family, as troubling as the corruption inside these agencies, the most troubling, the most dangerous part of our democracy is we don't have an unbiased media holding both sides equally accountable. So it's the complicit and corrupt legacy corporate media that we really need to hold accountable. And that's, it's a positive sign. What Elon Musk did
with X
by buying X, he saved free speech.
Yeah,
that is such an incredible inflection point because we were heading down the path of complete totalitarianism, where they've completely taking control. That's what's so good about Michael Benz's interview with Joe Rogan. He just lays out, particularly the first half, he just lays it out. People need to understand and listen to that and really understand what he's talking about and how close we came in this country. And again, God bless for Elon Musk for doing that.
Yeah, I see that very clearly. And I will tell you that whenever I get into these arguments with people, they cite things like CNN or the New York Times. And it's almost impossible to try to explain that it's not real. They look at you like you have three heads, Senator. They're like, okay, you watched a podcast from Joe Rogan who believes in dragons, and the New York Times and the Washington Post are fake. It's like, it is, I swear to God, you feel like you're Neo in the Matrix. Sir, you are fighting, you are fighting the good fight. I cannot thank you enough for all that you're doing. I want to know, first of all, what we can do as individuals to support these efforts on your behalf. Should we be writing our senators? What should we be doing? I know how to vote with our dollars. We talk about that. I know how to expose yourself to the information so you can make powerful choices, but there's vaccine mandates. This crap is in the food, which is why people like you, we rely upon to get that systemic change. But how can we help you do that?
Well, it starts with being informed. And so anybody listening to this, make sure you share this podcast with other people. Open up more eyes. I mean, it's a person-to-person type of process. And then again, I view myself still more Tea Party than Republican Party. I mean, there's plenty of parts of my, that I'm not real nuts about. Okay. When I first ran for election, I made two promises. I'll always tell you the truth, and I won't vote and by extension conduct myself worrying about re-election. I've honored those promises. I didn't promise anything else. I didn't promise to solve anybody's problems. Just like, I'm just going to tell you the truth. And I wasn't prescient. I didn't realize that is my primary function here. Is I'm an honest broker. Again, I'm not saying I'm always right, but when I say something, you can depend on the fact that that's what I believe is the truth. And if I get it wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. So it's about exposing yourself to the information, trying to discern the truth, which is hard to do. I mean, there is plenty of information on all sides.
Yes.
Okay. I'm happy. I've got a bias. I'm happy to hop onto things. I've got a great chief of staff here that, I always run things by him first. He goes, "No, this is, don't believe that." Okay. Yeah. There's plenty of things that I kind of want to believe, and I run it by my truth sayers. We do our vetting. Now, that's not true. So it's more and more difficult. So again, I think that's the value of people like yourself that are reliable, that, I would imagine when you get it wrong, you tell your listeners, okay, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable thing of podcasters is, again, explore, push the envelope, bring on controversial guests. But when you find out something that you've said is wrong, admit it, so that people have confidence in you. We need to have confidence in people like you as you're disseminating information, as you're putting people like me on to interview. So it's just similar. And then, not to get too political, don't let them win. Make sure they don't win elections. Trump cannot. He's not a perfect human being. Okay, the people he's going to bring in his administration, they're not perfect. Okay. Yeah. We have a huge mess on our hands. Our democracy is in peril. It truly is. Our nation is in peril. The world is in peril. This isn't going to get fixed overnight. We need to rely on the principles that made this country great. We've got to fight for the one essential ingredient, freedom.
Yes.
It starts with freedom of speech. That is just so crucial. So we got to jealously guard our freedom. And recognize, these are the principles that we have to hang our hat on.
Senator, is there anything that I should have asked that I did not?
Well,
I know I could ask you about Burisma, Hillary Clinton's emails. I get the Senate confirmations of the cabinet, but I don't know. Will you come back, sir? I could keep you forever.
I appreciate the opportunity, and let me apologize for taking down different rabbit holes.
This is exactly what I hoped for.
I didn't necessarily answer your exact question. I pretty well talked about things I want to talk about as it came to mind. When this all wraps up, I'll be thinking, should have talked about something like that.
Well, it's an open door, sir.
I will say I just got finished reading Bree Dressen's book. First of all, support her effort, but read that. It'll open up your eyes. It is the caveat. It makes me come off look like a saint, so I feel a little bad. I'm not a saint, okay? But what is important about reading that book is it goes way beyond just what Bree's suffering is. It just really puts in perspective what happened, and you will see how Bree relied on people at the NIH and protected them. First of all, I was the last person they wanted to contact with. I didn't realize this until I read the book, but I mean, it was like Johnson. I mean, God, anybody but Johnson. I mean, this guy's nuts. Okay, like Bobby Kennedy said, I was what do you call me? A super villain. Okay. So I mean, Bree the same way. I mean, that whole group. I mean, our first Zoom call, they had a secret word, a code word to just get off because they thought I was, like some total nutcase. So she lays it out, though. I mean, how they relying on the people at the NIH that they thought were going to help them, that were doing studies for them, that were going to publish these studies. They got just dragged along for literally years until they finally came to the conclusion. It's just going down to a black hole. This is never going to see the light of day. And then they stopped talking. I mean, it's just sad, but it's just so revealing. So I would really recommend for your listeners, first of all, buy Bree's book, worth a shot, read it and understand it. It's beyond the vaccine injury. It's going to explain a lot, and you're going to learn a lot, and your eyes will open up. Kind of like Bobby's with the vaccine injured, the moms of vaccine injured. Once your eyes are open up, you're going to start seeing that, and then just because you think they're lying in this case, don't think they're going to be truthful over here. They're lying across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Senator, where can we go to get more? Do you have? Is there a website? Where can people learn more about your work?
Yeah, well, I mean, our Senate website is ronjohnson.senate.gov. I think my Twitter handle is at @SenRonJohnson. You can find us. I mean, we're
Thank you.
We're easily found. I should know that. I always get asked it, but I'm terrible.
You are easily found. This is true. And I will put it in the show notes. And I would just like to say this last thing as I let you go. I am grateful for the fight. I want everyone to understand that this is like jumping in front of a moving bus. Nothing good comes out of taking these things on. And I know that better than anyone. And I cannot commend you enough for doing so. And in addition, you're working with a bunch of liberals, or at least former liberals, with zero judgment, and everybody's welcome, and it's an open dialogue. And I wish I was seeing that tolerance from the other side. I have an open door for them to come on and share their side and tell me what I'm missing, and none of them do. None of them. Just like Kamala didn't go on Rogan's show. They don't engage. And I cannot thank you enough for being willing to engage and willing to take these things on. And I would love to have you come back. So if you think of those things, you let me know, because I got about 20 other shows I could do with you tomorrow, Senator. Thank you so much.
We'll definitely do it. But again, I got to give you a lot of credit, Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump credit, for setting differences aside, focusing on an area of agreement, because I think, and this is true, most Americans, we share the same goals, right? There are differences, but on the big things in life, we share those same goals. So this is how you heal and unify a horribly divided nation, which is a real threat to our republic. It is. I mean, the fact that we're so horribly divided. So if Trump and Bobby Kennedy and people like you can set the differences aside and just demonstrate this is how you do it, and realize that, well, the people on the other side, I mean, they may have some wacky ideas, but they're not bad people.
No.
We all want to be able to take care of kids. We want safety. We want security. We want healthy food. We want to know the truth. I'm not an optimist. We're going down a very destructive path here in this country. We're in real peril. Since Bobby suspended his campaign and joined forces with Trump, and look at all the heat he took politically for that, even with his family. Yeah. God bless him for doing it. God bless for everybody else that has joined this coalition of people with open eyes. So I'm actually hopeful on it. And I think you'll see as the public demands it. I mean, politicians, elected officials respond to the public when they see, Bernie Sanders, I think he's going to vote for Bobby's confirmation.
I see that.
It'd be great. I mean, that's progress, right?
That is absolutely. Yes, I see that. And it is encouraging.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's pray. And we just might heal this nation. This could be the catalyst. This is a hinge point in history.
I hope so, Senator. Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again soon, I hope.
Have a very Merry Christmas if we don't talk to you before then. Take care. Thanks for having me on.
Sir, thank you so much. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And make sure to let me know what guests you want to see on in the future.